So I'm a lifelong nonprofiter and have studied some nonprofit law and done quite a bit of nonprofit political action. So I am going to introduce the basics. And Allison, if you could keep an eye on the waiting room, I don't have it up now that I'm sharing. But we're going to go through the basics of what nonprofits can and can't do in the US, what political action might look like at your library. And then once Heather joins, we're going to have an opportunity to talk to someone who does this full time about some strategies. So, nonprofit advocate. Oh, and I should mention, I'm also a volunteer of about 10 years, former staff member at the Station North School Library in Baltimore. So I'm in Baltimore on unceded Piscataway land. So I think there is a common misconception that nonprofits are not allowed to be political. And a lot of this stems from some existing ambiguity within the federal tax code as it relates to nonprofits. So the IRS gives nonprofits their tax exempt status, which means they don't pay taxes, and people who donate can also deduct those from their taxes, along with all kinds of other benefits. And in exchange, nonprofits are restricted in some very specific ways. Some might say intentionally to prevent change from happening. There's a lot to be said about the nonprofit industrial complex. And this is one of the big ways that it shows up, is that nonprofits are really limited when it comes to direct political action. So a nonprofit that wants to keep their tax exempt status cannot endorse or oppose a specific candidate or party. This is the big thing. So when we talk about endorsing or opposing things, legislation is better. Ideas are totally fine, but specific candidates are outside the purview of nonprofits. And then there is this limit that the IRS says that a nonprofit cannot spend a significant portion, quote unquote, of time and resources lobbying for or against specific legislation. And that's lobbying, not advocacy. We'll talk about those in a minute. That significant portion has no legal definition. There have been some legal tests where nonprofits, have either been called to court or have brought lawsuits. And some nonprofits have a special letter that says, here's how much you can do based on the size of your nonprofits. Some like really big national nonprofits have those designation letters. But a good rule of thumb is it's somewhere between 8 and 15% of your organization's time and money overall budget. That is sort of like the best guidance that exists out there. And yes, Steve, I am describing 501c3 nonprofits. There is a type of organization called a 501c4, which is not tax exempt. There actually are 9 501c designations in the US. 501c3 is a nonprofit. That's the only one that's tax exempt. Many organizations will have a 501c3 and then a separate 501c4. And that C4 can do as much lobbying as they want, but they don't get a tax exemption. The same way that a 501c3, or they get a tax exemption, but gifts to them, donations to them, and grants are not tax deductible. So often they cannot receive grants the same way that a nonprofit would. There are other downsides to being a C4. But that is really the structure that is most useful if you're interested in doing a lot of lobbying and advocacy. And there's all kinds of complicated structures where they can both be under an umbrella organization, they can partner. But there's plenty that nonprofits can do. And we were just talking about the capacity, right? Like often what is holding us back from political action is not, fear of reprisal from the IRS, but it's actually just the capacity to get out and do stuff. So there's actually plenty that we can do if we have the time and resources. And especially if you're being careful about how much you report doing. So if you have a staff of 3, one of them can't be a full-time lobbyist, right? That's like 30% of your staff. If you have a staff of 15, one of them could be a full-time lobbyist or advocate. So most libraries are not going to be in danger of crossing that threshold. But if you have a very small budget and you're spending a significant amount of it on, for example, like Every Action or another advocacy software, that's where you might need to be careful. What you can do as a nonprofit in the US, you can educate voters on issues and you can educate on candidates' voting records. So you can't say we endorse this candidate, but you can do candidate report cards, for example. You can register voters and you can encourage voting. So get out the vote campaigns, completely fine. You can endorse or oppose pieces of legislation. So you can say, we think this bill is a great idea. That's distinct from endorsing a candidate. And you can lobby politicians on specific pieces of legislation. So not only could we say our tool library supports the bottle bill, for example, in our community, it's like a pro-recycling bill. We could say we support that, or we support pro-union legislation. And we could go tell our city or state representatives, like, hey, we want you to vote for this. And we could encourage other people to do that. That's all fine. You just can't endorse a specific candidate. Keep an eye on chat here. Okay. So again, within the things that you can do, there's a distinction. So lobbying is what's limited to 8 to 15% of your budget and time. Advocacy is less limited. So lobbying has to do with very specific pieces of legislation, whether that's current or potential. So if you were going to the state house and saying, going door to door and saying, hey, we want you to vote for this bill, you can do that, but you have to be careful about how much. Same goes if you have a relationship with a state official and you want them to introduce legislation. Anytime you're talking about a specific piece of legislation and how someone votes, that's lobbying. Meeting with legislators to ask them to take direct action, or directing others to contact legislators to ask them to take direct action. So whether you're doing it yourself or you're encouraging other people to do it, if it's about specific legislation and specific actions, it's lobbying. Again, this is a little bit loosey-goosey, but just so you know, there's actually more that you can do under advocacy that is not limited by that cap. So lots of nonprofits do a lot of political advocacy, and that can include reporting on the success of a piece of legislation. So if a piece of legislation passed and it's benefiting your community and you want more like it, you can go tell legislators until the cows come home how great that legislation is. You can give them stats. You can host them for demonstrations and tours. You can be in touch with legislators as much as you want, as long as it's not direct lobbying. You can also educate legislators and the public about an issue as much as you want. So you could hold a workshop every single day about the right to repair movement if you wanted to. That is education, totally fine. Political education is unrestricted. And you can provide requested technical assistance. So the nonprofit that I work for now is an environmental nonprofit, and often our staff scientists will contribute, or our planners will contribute language to a piece of legislation that we work with a legislator to introduce. That's fine. That doesn't count towards the cap. That kind of technical assistance is really designated as like education or help. So if you are asking people to take a very specific legislative action, probably lobbying. If you are telling someone about an issue, probably advocacy. And again, most libraries of things are not going to come up to this, but if you're concerned, or more likely if someone on your board is concerned, you can always make the distinction. Are we educating people, or are we asking them to act? Any questions about those distinctions? Okay. All right. So a lot of people who I've worked with on boards will say, oh, well, nonprofits can't do political stuff, so they leave it there. Once they understand that you can, then they think, well, we don't have the staff, or we don't have the time. That's true, but I think the biggest challenge with organizations starting to take political action is deciding what action to take. What causes, movements, pieces of legislation most closely align with our mission and are like worth it, basically. There is always the threat of mission creep, right? Especially if you're a small organization, a volunteer-run organization, taking political action on things that are only tangentially related to your mission can suck precious resources away from your core mission. So it really makes sense to either develop or refer to, if you already have it, a clear organizational position framework. And this could be organizational values. So in the Library of Things toolkit, under one of the Getting Started chapters, there is a section about developing organizational values. Those are very, very useful when it comes to politics, which can be very divisive. It can be very personal. And so establishing, this is our organization, this is what it stands for, these are the things that we care about, sort of quote unquote beyond our mission, can be really important. So the library that I work with, for example, believes very strongly in valuing labor. And so we have taken political action signing on to letters or posting petitions about union legislation. We also believe really strong in collective ownership, like owning things together is the point of our organization. And so when there is legislation about like large nonprofit entities paying more towards taxes in our city, we promote that because it encourages collective ownership of our land. It's complicated, but once you understand your organizational values, then you can see how that flows directly into pieces of legislation, political movements, or how it doesn't, right? How we can say that's not something that we've spelled out in our values, so it's not really worth our organizational focus at the moment. You also want to make sure your whole team and your whole community has a voice in whether the organization decides to take that action or sign on to that cause, post that petition, participate in that rally. It will always be probably always be impossible to get all of your members, all of your volunteers, all of your board members, all of your staff members to agree on something. But making sure that you are following your established governance decision-making process is really important. And that seems like a no-brainer, but often these opportunities to participate in something, to sign a petition, to co-sign a letter, things like that, they pop up really quickly and they have really short deadlines. And so it can be easy to accidentally sort of circumvent your governance processes. But again, that's why it's important to have these conversations in advance and say, our organization is ready to start taking political action. Here are the things we will prioritize and here are our stances. Once you have that, you get that sign-on letter request and it's due in 2 days, you can more easily, as a leader or a staff member, say yes or no. And then if this is something that you, your community, your organization feels like you want to get more into, it's worth creating structures around it. So developing committees, coming up with legislative contacts, and developing clear communication guidelines with your community so that when you start taking political action, people understand that you're in it for the long haul. And then I think the biggest thing you can do, both in terms of values alignment, making sure you're staying within your boundaries and managing your capacity, is to look for other organizations doing the same thing. So joining a movement for a piece of legislation or for political change in your city, your state, is always going to be more effective. You build collective power, you can leverage other people's expertise and experience, and you don't have to do it all yourself, which is really nice. So here are some of the issues that we, as the To Library Alliance Steering Committee, know of that libraries are getting involved in. So the first one that I mentioned already is the right to repair movement, R2R. This is a really pretty well-established political movement to try to change usually state requirements for companies to allow their products to be repairable. There has been a movement among manufacturers to make things to build in some planned obsolescence and to make things impossible to repair. So we're trying to counter that. Extended producer responsibility has a lot to do with like packaging, making sure that if people are producing a product that comes in a package that is difficult to recycle, that they are taking accountability for that. And then some larger issues are conservation. So a lot of libraries, especially in the Pacific Northwest that we work with, are really focused on environmental sustainability, and that's what draws a lot of people to them. I know our library in Baltimore is really focused on equity and access. So economic disparity is something that we really face, and was the genesis for our library. So we look at a lot of equity and access legislation. Public health, especially as it relates to urban libraries of things, is often something that we look at, and disaster preparedness. So I know in North Carolina, there's been a lot of attention to the Asheville Tool Library in Western North Carolina Repair Cafe and what they have done to help respond to the hurricane last year. But community resilience is, I think, a pretty large and growing focus of libraries of things, and something that I think we'll probably talk about next month at our big, exciting mutual aid collab with Shareable. So let me pause there and see if anyone has any questions. And I will also see if Heather has been able to join us yet. Looks like she is not in yet. So I'm just going to stop there while we wait for Heather to join us and check in. So what are folks thinking about in terms of political action, either at your library or like Dominica, if you're just sort of wading into this? Steve, I know you and Jeff work with some established libraries. What have you all done, or what are you thinking about?
I'll contribute. I wouldn't call it advocacy, but I got really excited about a lot of right to repair legislation the last legislative cycle and found some stuff from the PIRG, the Oregon Public Interest Research Group, that was really tracking the movements well. So I was trying to put that in the tool library. I think we might have done one social post about it or something. Um, Interesting that you said hard to get everybody in your organization, everybody to agree to it. I feel like it's hard to get everybody even to know that this is part of what we're doing. I mean, I and a few of us can reel our mission statement off. And I suspect folks are like, "Oh, why do we exist?" Anyway, that's what we've done along the lines is pay attention to right to repair, which has been doing quite well in Oregon. Extended producer responsibility is also doing quite well. And our recycling rules changed significantly just very recently. Got some documentation in the library about that. Hope that helps.
Yeah, totally. Jeff, how about you in Carlisle, Pennsylvania? You guys thinking about this at all?
Yeah, well, we had an event that we were going to host that was going to be part fix it fair, part mending, like bringing clothes swap, and then it also kind of got wrapped into both a Planned Parenthood and um, anarchy group that it kind of got out of hand in terms of what we expected was going to be coming in, and we didn't have that reference plan to kind of go back on, so we just had to be like, hey, this is too much. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
But in terms of advocacy, we were in that gray zone of we don't know what we're allowed to do, so we just apolitical most of the time.
Mhm.
And we do have, I think 3 years ago, we brought in a large kind of group of bike enthusiasts, bike fixers. They even spawned off their own bike advocacy group. Um, and it's really encouraging to hear like a lot of the advocacy side of things because they basically do a lot of the things that, many of our board are um, supportive of. And they like petition the local government. There was in Carlisle, there was basically a vote yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, that basically was to put in more better bike infrastructure in the streets of Carlisle. And it was around, do we have protected bike lanes? Do we have this, that? And one of our board members, but also he's part of this advocacy group, was there. His son had been in an accident like that day.
Mhm.
Him and his friend got really injured, and so it was like perfect timing, perfect, like, yeah, like hammer it home. We need safer streets, and this is, I think, an important tie-in for how, like, if we're going to be this bike center as well as a tool library and as well as this other resource, that we really like show up for the community and those resources in that way.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that experience of like we were having a fair and then these people wanted to table and these people wanted to table and then this person wanted to co-sponsor and it also can coalition building can really dilute the purpose of an advocacy event or campaign or things like that. So it's really important, like you said, to like find that point of connection between these organizations and say, what is our overlap and like how are we all targeting our messaging? Might not be our core mission, all of us, but we all care about this thing, and that is the important communication point.
Yeah, and
So
I know that like the tool library itself wasn't advocating for these things when you bring in someone else to host an event. So I
mhm.
would ask that as like a where's where's the gray area in that circumstance? But
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It sounds like what you're doing is advocacy and not lobbying. So if you're hosting an organization, unless they are having people like sign postcards while they're there to send to the lobbyists, that doesn't count as lobbying. And I'm also pretty sure that you're fine.
gotcha. Thanks.
Uh, another angle on that is, how many hours are they there compared to how many other hours is the library open, and you hit
Yeah.
your 15% right there, I'm sure,
Yeah, but they look at the whole year. So anyway, we can definitely talk more about that. I want to welcome Heather, who's joining us, Executive Director of Zero Waste Washington, fresh off a plane. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Heather. I am happy to turn it over to you to share your
Great.
screen.
Okay, good. Can you all hear
And
me?
yep, you're
Okay,
loud and clear.
let me know if this when I try to share that it actually shares. Let's see, share here. I'm going to turn off my video to conserve energy here. And let's see, is this showing in presentation mode?
It is. You're all set.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. Well, hi everybody. I'm Heather Trim. I'm Executive Director of Zero Waste Washington. I believe I'm here to provide color commentary from the ground on doing advocacy. And Zero Waste Washington, if you're not familiar with us, we're in Washington State, statewide nonprofit. We work to make trash obsolete, and we mainly work on trying to get laws passed. We do research and we do pilot projects. And we have 7 focus areas. You'll notice the top right hand, reuse, repair. So this is a big part of the work that we've done. And I'm going to be giving you several examples of our legislative effort, and because these illustrate various points that I'm trying to make, hopefully. This is our beautiful cherry blossom spring that we get every year. So it's always really fun to be at our legislature with this beautiful cherry blossoms. So let's start with right to repair. I'm going to take you through an 8-year saga of getting this bill passed. We started in 2018 on this bill, and that guy there, Mitch, who was first doing computer repairs, maybe at fix-it-fair type things, but anyway, then now today on the left, he now has a full-on not small independent store, but he started out in his garage. In year 1, it's the bill stalled out in rules, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with the terminology, but it didn't make it to the House floor. And at that point, there were no right to repair laws for electronics in law in the United States. So this was early days, 2018. 2019, and hopefully many of you guys know Kyle Weens, who's with iFixit. He is an awesome guy. He's kind of the king of this whole effort in terms of trying to get this passed. There he is testifying. It stalled again in the House, no action in the Senate. I'm gonna go quickly through these. In 2020, it's no action in the House, but action in the Senate, but it stalled at the very first policy committee. This is the senator who's the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and she even came into the hearing to testify how much she liked this bill, and even so, it didn't work. We also had this situation where this guy came and did videos of our legislators and then made fun of the lobbyists on the other side, especially women, and that 100% killed the bill immediately. So one challenge is, people who come in and aren't quite aware of like what you don't want to do in terms of like then end up killing the bill. I don't think he wanted to kill the bill, but he definitely killed the bill. This is Senator Stanford, though, who did continue on, Derek Stanford, who did continue on being a champion of the bill, of the final bill that passed. And he did ask a brilliant question about, well, what about, can't I just replace the fan on my Xbox? The answer was no. And then in 21, it stalled again. This is the chair who actually was very amenable to the topic, and he loved Kyle. So there were all these like one-on-ones with him and Kyle, but it didn't work. And then in 2022, it didn't make it out again. And at this point, the reason the bills were not passing in the state, in Washington and other states, was Apple. Apple killed it. Apple had enough lobby clout here to do that. And 23 again stalled in both the House and the Senate. That should say, the first line should say stalled in the House Environment Committee. Apple killed it. In 24, we had a new player get involved, and that was Consumer Reports. So that is Stacy, who is testifying from there. We did pretty well, but again, we stalled. So we got it all the way from the House into the Senate, and we stalled in the Senate Environment Committee. Thank you, Apple. In the meantime, New York, Colorado passed both a wheelchair and an ag, Minnesota, California, Oregon, and then Colorado again. So first Colorado did a wheelchair and ag, and then they did electronic. So all this stuff happened in the meantime, and we still did not have a Washington bill until 2025, earlier this year. 8 years. So one of my points I'm trying to make is that it can sometimes take a really long time to get a bill passed. And the bill that passed includes both electronics and appliances. So it's a little bit broader bill than we had in years before. One thing that shifted was that Google and Microsoft came around. They actually came around the year before, but Apple was still opposed. So Apple was the problem. But in 2025, probably because I think they saw the writing on the wall, some other states had passed, like Oregon. We did like a small amendment for them, and then they became happy. So here is the day, March 4th, where Rep. Gregerson, Mia Gregerson, I have her circled in red, who's a Democrat. She's the sponsor, talked in favor of the bill on the floor. And then on the right, that's Representative Bernard, who's a Republican. She also talked in favor of the bill. And so here are the lobbyists in the gallery overlooking, and you can see me there in the middle, and then I'm surrounded by Microsoft and Google and Seattle and Amazon. And then the woman in red, appropriately wearing red, from Apple. And it was like the weirdest thing, because now all of a sudden she was our buddy. It was like so weird. And here's the vote, 94-1. And so that was amazing. And here we are, one of the contract lobbyists that Per got, and then me and Representative Gregerson right after that amazing floor vote after all of that 8 years of turmoil. Very briefly, it covers, it starts in January 1 of 2026. It covers digital electronic products. It does not allow for, it doesn't deal with parts pairing. That was a big fight. Now, it is for personal, family, and household purposes, and it's tangible personal property. So it's things that have basically a microprocessor or microcontroller inside of it. So that includes a lot of products. So it's actually very expansive. So we're pretty psyched about that. Now, here's the thing that's not cool is how many things are exempt. So you can see that a lot of stuff is exempt, and this was a pain, but this is what happened with the situation. And you'll see there about third from the bottom, video games are not included. So that was too bad. And we also really would like to get ACT. So we want other states to pass it, because basically if states can pass these things, then we're golden for the whole US. And then, because you guys are in this business of doing the tool libraries, liability is a big issue. And so there is a clause in there that basically says that the original manufacturer is not going to be held liable for any damage or injury caused by the repairs. Now that took 8 years. Okay, here's the opposite story. This is again Rep. Gregerson on the left with Marcia Cutting, who's a wheelchair advocate, electronic, a motorized wheelchair. And on the right is a guy who's doing a volunteer, like a tool library event, repair event for wheelchairs. And this bill was very dramatic. It was only focused on wheelchairs. And we were opposed by the medical industry. It was really crazy. And so we had to do advocacy. So this is the wheelchair, some of the wheelchair advocates, when we basically had to go in person. This is an outdoor, we called it a visibility event. We're going to call it a rally, but they said we don't really rally. We prefer visibility event. And then we went into the chambers. And so this is outside the Democratic House chambers door. And then into the hearing room. And there they had to take away the first 2 rows of chairs. And then all the wheelchair users were like sitting there front row, giving those Democrats and Republicans, but it was the Democrats, some Democrats who were giving us problems. You can see Rep. Gregerson in the middle in the back. Great news is that, oops, I don't have the picture where it got signed. Anyway, this bill passed almost unanimously. I think it was 1 vote, not in 1 year. And it was really due to the very good hardcore advocacy by the wheelchair users. So that was really great. Okay, I know that EPR is something that was mentioned, I think, on your agenda already, extended producer responsibility. And so it took 6 years to get this bill passed. This is Rep. Liz Berry on the right and Rep. Liz Lovelet on the left. We call them the lizards. And the reason I'm bringing up this bill is to just show a tactic that the opposition used. So this bill is a huge bill. It's reforming recycling in Washington. It's the 7th state to pass this initiative, and presumably some of you are from states where this is also the case. So what happened is, and you can see the date here, March 4th, the waste industry was dead set against this bill. For 6 years, they were able to kill it until this year. And what they did is they put out, we had heard this was coming, they put out ads. So you can see this is the Olympian. So this is the newspaper in our state capital where, a lot of legislators would see it. They put out ads that say green programs shouldn't put you in the red. And then also this is the Seattle Times, which is also, read by a lot of the legislators in our state. And so we kind of knew this was coming. We were ready. So on March, sorry, this is the website. So when you clicked, it would put you here. So it was a pretty well done campaign that they did. So we were ready. March 6th, 2 days later, we had our counter ads ready. So these are the ads that ran in the same sort of setting. I don't have them in place. I just have the ads we did. Don't let big garbage trash recycling. Why does big garbage want to trash recycling, and don't let Washington's recycling get trash? And then that led to our website that said, don't let big garbage trash recycling and the environment. So we basically had to spend a bunch of money to do a counter campaign against them. So this is, when it gets nasty, you got to be nasty. But we didn't want to do this. This is not the kind of thing we want to do. We don't want to go negative on our opponents. We don't want to do ad campaigns, but we basically were forced into it. Now, this is just a quick slide that shows the different types of advocacy that is done in terms of trying to get bills passed. So marches, like I said, we had that visibility event, meetings, direct lobbying, etc. And then in case you haven't already kind of had this discussion, it's really great to get letters to the editor all throughout the whole legislative session. The pointers on this, though, is they've got to be short. They've got to be 250 words or less. Less is best. And then write to all the different publications, because nowadays with social media, even the small publications will get picked up and the legislators will see it. It's critical that the letter have a hook. If there's a news angle, like you could talk about something related to a tool library, something like that, or outrage, those are good. But if it's just blah, 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 it will just go in one ear out the other, and you got to stay on message and be specific. Now, I'm going to just conclude with the messaging that we used to get the bill passed, the right to repair bill passed, because I think these same messages are going to work for other bills that are that would be beneficial for tool libraries and such. So one is talking about the obstacles to repair. Oh, sorry, shoot. Sorry about that. Hang on. So one is talking about sort of the problems. In this case, we did talk about tool libraries a little bit, but this is obviously framed in terms of repair, small community repair stores. And we did a lot here about jobs and about rural areas and access. Then we have the environmental impact. So the emissions, the recycling challenges, and then all the e-waste that we have generated. And I'll share these slides if you need them later, Leanna. And then a big argument that worked very, very well. Someone wants to be admitted. That worked very, very well is DEI, which of course in some states is not going to work well, but worked very well in Washington, which is the issue about digital equity and accessibility, and then of course supporting small businesses and job creation. So these were very, very potent messages that I definitely recommend you all use in other locations. And of course, the number one thing you can do is vote. And you all know this. I don't think I have to tell any of you that that's the number one thing to do. All right. So I will stop sharing here because maybe you guys have some questions. And I apologize in advance. I'm not going to turn my video. My cell phone is in the red. zone. So hopefully, I will not. I'm sitting in a car in parking lot, so hopefully, I will. I might drop off. But let's get started on questions and maybe other questions you guys, or unless Leanna, you have something else you want to do agenda wise.
I was just going to say, no, I'm so grateful that you were and impressed you were able to do that from a phone. And if you need to leave at any point, we'll just continue.
Okay, cool. All right, do y'all have any comments or questions? Maybe a better way of saying it. Your experiences.
Steve says it's a tour de force. I agree.
Well, let's just say with a lot of great partners. So we had really, really good partnerships on all the bills. Cities and counties are really into this. PERG, other environmental groups, community groups, tool libraries. I mean, this was not us. This was a large, you cannot do this work unless you have a large coalition of people. So that's one thing, build a coalition, which I think is one of your tips.
And Heather, it sounds like you had partners in the legislature as well. So how important do you think it is to have, going into a legislative session, to have legislators who are champions for the bill?
So there are some legislators who are really, really great at being your champion, and others who are less so for a variety of reasons. So it is really critical that you have those champions, and it's hard to figure it out. And so sometimes what we've done is we have done smaller bills with the legislator to see how that goes, and then come back with them with a bigger bill, because it's got to be a legislator who, well, I mean, look, Mia Gregerson put in 8 years on this bill, 8 years, and she was tough and she had a really strong spine, and she said, you know, I'm in it for the long term. So that was really important. And then Liz Lovelet and Liz Berry, who helped pass our extenders push spine, Liz Berry had 300 meetings on that bill in 2 years. 300 meetings, more than 300 probably. So she put in a ton of work. So you need legislators who are willing to really go to bat for your bill if it's a system changing bill. Sometimes it's helpful to go with a person who's a first year legislator, because there is this tradition in most houses, most states, where they want to give the first year people a bill to pass. They'll let them pass it, and so maybe your bill will be the one. So that has actually worked with us for some bills, believe it or not. But it is, if you have a legislator who doesn't even crack the bill open, who messes up, like talking about the bill in the testimony, and who doesn't really care about your bill, it's very difficult to get the bill passed. So I would say that's like the number one thing if you're serious about getting a bill passed. And in purple and red states, this is a bipartisan issue. So there is, and we plan to come back with ag. The farmers, those are Republican champions. So I'm not sure what states you guys are in, but that is this whole thing is a bipartisan issue.
Other questions?
Hi, Heather. My name's Jeff. That was a great presentation.
Hey, Jeff, what state are you in?
I'm in Pennsylvania.
Okay, great.
So my question is about how tool libraries can focus their efforts. So we have all different sizes. Mine is quite a small tool library. And so I wonder what your focus would be for a small tool library doing something like this. Would you focus on local, state, or just trying to push in with other tool libraries and getting something national going?
Yeah, good question. So I think it depends on what you're trying to get done. But like, let's say you're trying to get a grant program for tool libraries or tool libraries and similar things, repair. That's probably going to be a statewide effort. And what I would do there, or you're trying to get right to repair passed, that's definitely a state level thing. Then what I would do is build a coalition and try to get the PERGs involved, because US PERG does have a staff person, Nathan, who works just on this. And then Kyle is awesome with iFixit. So they'll come help you. But the critical thing here is you've got to get a state, a coalition going of you and all the other folks and environmental groups. The other thing is this, and this is kind of a harsh reality, but it really can't, it may only be like $3,000 to $5,000 a session. You really need to get a contract lobbyist. The reason I should have said this in my tips, the reason you need a contract, so even though I moved to Olympia and I stay there for the whole 3 months or 4 months and come home on the weekends, so I'm lobbying every day, hardcore. we still, on top of that, hire a contract lobbyist. And for this bill, I showed you the photo of the contract lobbyist we hired. The reason you need a contract, and this is, I hate to say this because it's like, what? Really? You got to do this? But the contract lobbyists who live in the state capitol, they've been working they've been working various issues for years. They have the cell numbers of the legislators, and they can get a meeting on the spot. And so we, the advocates, don't have that access, and it's terrible. This is a terrible thing, but it is a reality. And so if you are very serious about trying to get a bill passed, you would probably need to put together some money to pay for the contract lobbyist, and you would need to build a coalition. So that's the state level. Now, the city level, which I've done a lot of work on city and county level too, is way easier in some regards. I'm going to say maybe not entirely, and much more straightforward, because they are sitting, the city council people or county council are sitting right there on the, you are their constituent, and their constituents are right there front and center for them. So you can sometimes more easily get something done on a city or county level, but the problem is the scope of the issue that you're trying to solve. So if it's a city or county ordinance that's going to help, require reuse before recycling at the recycling facility, like a reuse center, which, by the way, is a cool thing. So we do deep dives on reuse that some of you guys, if you don't already know about them, Leanna, maybe I can email you the link to this. So, because you can look, we just did one last week. I'm on a little committee that's planning these, and it's free, it's online, and we had a reuse center in Massachusetts and a reuse center, I think it was in New York, where at the when people are going to the dump, they divert stuff to the reuse center. So they turn and go the other direction. And there's one in Banff, and we have kind of one here, but not that great. So this is something that would be a local thing that you could do. So I'm trying to think of local examples. So it depends on the scale.
Yeah, we were able to get, we were part of a large coalition that got plastic bags banned in our city from an environmental perspective. And we're working on a statewide bottle bill right now for a bottle deposit, just like Zero Waste Washington, that's extended producer responsibility. But
Right.
Also the State Makerspace Association in Maryland was able to get several $1 million appropriated from the state. So I'm glad that Heather mentioned funding. Funding is something that you can lobby for. And the way that we were able to do that is that we got a couple of universities that had makerspaces to champion that with us. And they had lobbyists, right? Because universities do a lot of fundraising at the state level. So if you can find sort of a heavy hitter that is aligned with your mission, even if they're not already focused on it, if you can get them behind it, sometimes that momentum can carry something across the finish line.
Yep. Direct budget appropriations are not that hard to do, depending on your state's budget. We're in a budget crisis right now, but in years when you're not, those happen kind of frequently. It's the thing you hear about in the media, those earmarks. But you know what? They happen a lot.
Yeah, we were told like $2 to $5 million, not a big deal. We could just write that in. That's fine.
I know, real money to us, but not to
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve, what state are you in?
Hey, Heather, thanks. I'm in Oregon.
There you go.
Mhm.
You guys have done a lot of great stuff there. And then Allison, what state are you in?
I'm in Indiana.
Okay, tougher state. And then Shelby?
I'm in Kentucky.
Okay, and then I don't know if Tom or Andreas can come.
Yeah, I'm out here too. I'm out in California.
Oh, well, there you go. Oh yeah, Tom, I know your name. And then Andreas?
Germany. I was late in the session. Germany. I was a tool library, but I'm interested in this topic. It's
I
probably
see. Okay, great.
similar process probably here.
Yeah. Yeah, California and Oregon and Washington, we all compete in a friendly way. We all try to one up each other. And that's great. It works really, that's another thing I should have said. It works really well when another state passes a law, and then you can go one step further. So we all leapfrog each other. And of course, we have the West Coast sweep and a lot of stuff.
Go ahead, Steve.
That seems super true. I'm not totally caught up on it, but I feel like the Midwest states are doing better on the ag equipment. So, it's not like the West Coast has it all down. If Tom
That's right.
or
Nope,
about
I
agriculture
agree.
equipment.
Yep.
Yeah, it's sort of shocking the whole John Deere thing. And in case some of you don't know, one of the issues is this: the tractor dealers in the rural areas give a lot of money to legislators, and the farmers who are, you know, the major constituents, it's a tension between those two.
Yeah, Heather, I love the point that you made about pointing to other municipalities and states and the success that they've had. So as I mentioned, one of the things that you can do that doesn't count towards your lobbying cap is talk about how great a bill is, right? You can say this legislation passed and this is the result. And so if there is something that you are looking to do in your state and you know that there's a tool library in another state that has passed that legislation, even if the tool library wasn't involved, that's one of the things that the Tool Library Alliance can be helpful in connecting you and bringing that conversation to across state lines.
Yep. Okay. Well,
I think that's it for today. Heather,
out?
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and thank you for the work that you do. Cami Bruner is a frequent flyer with us, and
Oh yeah,
I know
great.
that you all work
Cami's great.
work extremely hard, and it's great to have you there. So the Zero Waste Washington site is already linked from toollibraryalliance.org, but Heather, if you wouldn't mind sharing your slides, I will make sure that those get linked along with the recording of this.
Great.
Amanda also included a lot of legislative and advocacy resources in our slides that we will post as well.
Great. Fabulous. All right.
Thank
Well,
you
good
so
luck.
much.
And anytime anyone needs any other help, you know, just reach out. All right. I'll
You're
see
the
you
best.
later. Bye.
Take care, everyone. All right. So that brings us to the end of today. And we hope you can join us next month for our mutual aid session with Shareable. This will be a very special, very large, very exciting monthly collab. And thanks as always to Shareable for being the fiscal sponsor of the Tool Library Alliance and hosting the Zoom sessions. We really appreciate it. Couldn't do it without you. And yeah, if you're interested in getting more involved with the Tool Library Alliance, we're open to any library in the US that lends tools and has been operating for 2 years or more. And the International Library of Things Google group is open to anyone. So feel free to follow up with us afterwards to get more connected. Okay. I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thanks.
Thanks all.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everyone.